Steve, one of the rabbis at Beth Tzedek Congregation, Toronto, Ontario. I'm with my new friend and colleague and neighbor, Rabbi Yael Splansky from Holy Blossom, one of the largest Reformed congregations in Canada, if not the largest Reformed congregation in Canada. Rabbi Splansky and I are, we're literally, our shuls are a block apart. And the life of rabbis and people who have good intention and goodwill to get together, but life seems to always get in the way where, Rabbi, you might be one of my friends who I only happen to see in Jerusalem for whatever reason. It's like people who are in the same city, but things get so crazy that you can't do that. But I'm really glad that you're able to join us for this. This is Conversations Over Coffee, a series that we've started at Beth Tzedek. Now I think this is the 6th week. Designed as an opportunity just for friends and colleagues and interesting people to get together and talk about the world under the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic. We are both senior rabbis at very large congregations, very active and engaged historic communities within the Toronto and Canadian community. Let's just start, Rabbi, how are you doing?
Thank you. So first of all, thank you for the invitation. I think it's fantastic that you're doing this. I've got my coffee right here. It's been iced since this morning. And I remember when you were new to town, I brought you lunch and we had our first get together. And my intention was that it would be, every other month we'd be able to get together, but we're both running so fast that it's hard to find each other. So I appreciate this opportunity to spend some time with you today. And I also want you to know that, like for rabbis everywhere, we're all carrying a similar burden. And I'm cheering for everyone, right? We all need koach and we all need some mazel too. And I know everyone's working so hard to do right by the Jewish people. And we will find our way. We will. How am I doing? I would say I'm doing fine. Thank God my family is healthy. That's all that really matters at the end of the day. I worry a lot. I am working very hard, long hours. Just as always, but now I find it's even harder, right? The hours were always long, but now everything through the screen just makes it harder to connect, harder to
focus sometimes as well.
Focus, yeah, it's draining through the screen. So that's how I'm doing. We rabbis have the luxury of endless opportunities to do good, and that feels great. I know some people are feeling helpless and hopeless, and that can get you down. I never have those moments because there's just so much to be done. So I'm grateful for that.
No, I find something similar. It's like the, in moments such as this, spiritual communities, faith groups, really go into full gear. I know that you and Holy Blossom, all of us in the synagogue world, for the last decades, we've been struggling. How do you engage people? How do you, reach out to them on a regular basis and so forth? And then suddenly something like this happens and everybody's self-isolated. And I know that we've reached out and done now the 2nd round of phone calls to every household within the shul, which for us is like, 4,500, it's 2,300 households, but there's like 4,500 people that are involved with it. And everybody, what surprised me is how grateful people are just to be contacted. Within that, we've identified vulnerable people, we've identified food insecurities, poverty issues have gotten worse, health issues, mental health issues, and all those other kinds of things. But just reaching out to people, and it's almost as if people were surprised that it was happening, which I just found interesting. What's been your experience at Holy Blossom in terms of responding to this crisis with your community?
Yeah, so very similar. We're definitely running in parallel tracks. And with that, what do we call it? Kol hakavod, because you need a pun for, for everything in Jewish life. And similarly, people were grateful. They were surprised to hear from us. And we did learn a lot of useful information in addition to a short survey that went out that second week, I suppose. So what are we finding? Some folks are very lonely. And so they're turning to the synagogue in ways that I think surprise them too. You know, people are asking the big questions: what really matters in life? You know, where is God in this? There are theological questions people are asking. So people are turning for prayer, for stimulation, intellectual stimulation. So our classes are online, are being, you know, double, triple participation. So it's interesting to watch the trend lines, and then sometimes hard to decipher. Our director of communications, Deanna Levy, who's been incredible throughout this whole thing, found that the top 5 countries that are logging into Holy Blossom for one reason or another are Canada, US, number 5 is Israel. None of that's a surprise. But 2 and 3 are, you want to guess?
I'm going to say Argentina and France, maybe.
Okay, so France is lower. I think it's number 7, maybe. But number 3 and 4 are Singapore and South Korea.
Singapore and South Korea.
God only knows why. I mean, I don't know how to interpret that data.
Well, we know that the South Koreans are very fond of Jews and Judaism, and there's been this, for the last 20 years, there's been this incredible community that has been studying Talmud.
I've read about that, yeah.
They, you know, so that it's not so surprising that they would have this thing for Judaism. It's like, you know, how do they find you? I don't know. I don't know what countries have been logging into us, although our communications, one of our communications team members is on this call. Maybe she'll tell me afterwards. That's an interesting question, but I do know that we've had people that have found us from all sorts of different places and have joined us for Daily Minyan. There's a woman in BC, for example, in British Columbia, who suffered a loss, and for whatever reason, our minyan, its time, its format, or whatnot, worked for her, and she's become a regular in our weekly minyan. And so that is one of the interesting things about this. Is suddenly, not only do you see your own community engage more often because people are so hungry for connection. You know, you don't realize how important it is until you don't have it, which is, I suppose, true for a lot of things. But it's also, you know, our reach has gone well beyond what we otherwise would get. Our most popular activities are Kabbalat Shabbat, which is getting, you know, somewhere between 1,500 and 3,000 unique views. Wow. This coffee over conversations, you know, has been very popular, as well as, you know, some other things. So that's been interesting to see that, like, you know, it would be nice if we had 10,000 people or 2,000 people for Kabbalat Shabbat. You know, even when we do something programmed, it would be nice if we do that. But the reach has just gone much beyond that. How much did you do online before the pandemic?
Very little, next to nothing. It was a rare occasion when we would, you know, live stream with our sister congregation in Israel, or across the Canadian Reform movement, a special program that was very, very rare. We were not wired for live streaming. Many Reform congregations, especially the large ones, but small and medium also, have been live streaming for years and years, and we were not. So this is all really new territory for us. And again, thanks to Deanna, we were able to just kick it up within less than a week, actually. So there's been a steep learning curve that way. We just had our tech rehearsal for Shavuot. You know, this is not what you or I went to rabbinical school for. But it's becoming essential to keep our congregations connected. So I'm really grateful for the tools that we have, although they are only tools. It's not the real deal.
And what are the ways in which, so we're going to start live streaming on Shabbat and Yom Tov, which for Bet Tzedek is a really significant change. It comes out of, you know, of course, the concept of Shat Chak and Pekuach Nefesh. That this is an extraordinary, it's a crisis moment. And Pekuach Nefesh is like, you know, the building is closed. It's like, you know, the synagogue is still open. It's the building that's closed. But as a result of that, you know, our primary mission is to care and connect and create meaningful opportunities for people. And we just made the decision, as we see these measures going on into the future, and unfortunately with the likelihood that we will not be able to have Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur in the building, certainly not in the way in which we used to have it, if at all, if we're allowed to do that, we can't fulfill our mission if we're not streaming at these moments. And so we have to, like, on one hand, balance a sensitivity to how we understand halakha, Jewish law, and the halachic process with the reality of what the tool is and how the tool functions. But the thing that actually worries me the most is that the means of engagement online is very different than the means of engagement when you're in person. What kind of thought have you given to how you engage a congregation that's sitting in their living room, that's sitting in their kitchen, that might be sitting in an office, you know, and sitting, you know, by themselves or with a smaller group of people? You know, what kind of thought have you given to specifically engage people in this process using this medium?
Yeah. So early on, I would tell our team at Holy Blossom, no one is expecting polish here. No one's expecting high production. Just the fact that we're doing this at all, and showing our faces and showing up and meeting people when they need us is, you know, Dayenu. And that was true for the first run. And now we're finding that actually people do need more from us, that it isn't just showing up, but it is about content and making sure that it is creative and meaningful. You know, there's much better entertainment out there. So we shouldn't pretend that we can, you know, the professional musicians and the professional film people, that is not who we are. Nevertheless, we know how to get to the heart of the matter as rabbis and cantors. So whether it's through music, through teaching, we have to provide the real deal. And thank goodness we've got it, right? We've got the goods, whether it's an ancient text that can speak to the moment, or a melody that uplifts the soul just when someone needs it most. We've got all the goods. So that's the part that I'm finding, you know, part of our learning curve, actually. So as we've been preparing for the High Holy Days, you know, the rabbis and cantors, we've been digging down with all kinds of content ideas and creative ideas, and I'm excited about it. And then we shared it with the worship committee on Friday. And I just asked an open-ended question about, what do you need from the High Holidays this year? And it was all about connection. They miss one another. And so I'm finding that another platform that we can provide that is really sustaining people is an opportunity just to talk to each other and see each other. You know, Shabbat mornings, I have Torah study from 9 to 10, but our service doesn't start until 10:30. So I just leave the line open, and people sometimes continue talking about the themes of the Torah study, but sometimes it's like, oh, Anne, how's your garden coming along? You know, that's all they want. And again, what a gift and a privilege that we're able to provide those platforms for people when they need them most.
We found that too. So on twice a week, we extend the minyan time. We used to have breakfast after every minyan. So we extend the minyan time for people to sit and schmooze and grab a cup of coffee and have breakfast at home. But one of the other very popular things that started, you know, which was we have a Kiddush club, right? You know, for people that are watching might not know what a Kiddush club is. It's a group of people who really don't like the rabbi sermon, and they go out. I'm being a little facetious, and I love my people that are in the Kiddush club, but they go out. I mean, at Bet Tzedek, it's a big deal. It's like it's a catered oneg. It's like
Wow.
you bring, you know, the buy-in is X amount of dollars a year and a couple bottles of scotch, and you know, they go and it's a really powerful community. And so one of the members decided to start doing it on Friday afternoon, just before Kabbalat Shabbat. And it's become like, there's like 60 sign-ins. So there's like anywhere between 75 and 100 people that are now participating. And every week, 3 people are asked to share something about their experience. And what's been amazing about it is that people take it really, really seriously. Mm-hmm. And they write out what they want to say. And it could be 2 or 3 pages of just sharing emotions, their concerns, what inspires them, and so forth. And then everybody gives a l'chaim, just to have that sense of connection and that ability to speak with each other. And that's just been, I found that to be one of the things that inspires me doing all of this, is that the seriousness by which people take that moment of sharing, both in terms of giving of themselves and the listening and receiving that others do. What's been inspiring you during this?
Well, I would say, and this is the part that's not surprising, actually, is the quality of the leadership team, the lay leadership and their professional partners. People really want to help. And we had mitzvah week a couple weeks ago, as a way of just galvanizing and, you know, mobilizing mitzvot, that's what we called it, for people to do good from their own homes or from their backyards, and some people safely delivering food and other necessary items to hospitals and so on, food shelters. People want to do good, so we have to provide the platforms for them to do that. And sometimes it's just a gimmick, like calling it mitzvah week. You know, there's nothing magical about a week in May, but we chose it and we made some noise about it, and then people got organized around it, you know. So that's the part that is really keeps me going, is the creativity and the compassion of our leadership. Even with that calling project that you mentioned, sometimes people would receive a call, like an elder would receive a call and say, this has been really nice. Can I be a caller too? You probably saw that, right? So immediately they wanted to flip it around from being a recipient to being a contributor. So it doesn't surprise me. We know we've got good people, but the sincerity and the quantity and the quality of that has sustained me.
You know, for me too, it's, you know, exactly as you said, it's like you call people, check in on them and say, oh, I got time, I can call other people. And, you know, there's it's I have to say, as someone who's only been in Canada now for 15 months, it's really nice to be in Canada during
Yeah.
this crisis.
Yes.
Not only because I feel really blessed to work with such a great group of colleagues and lay leadership, but just the whole vibe of the city and the province and the country is, just seems really focused on doing the right thing and chesed, and that just makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, I
What
agree. We say that over and over again in earshot of our kids so that they can appreciate how lucky we are to be here.
Yeah. What are the things that you're worried about? What are the things that the synagogue's worried about, and what are you doing to respond to that worry?
So I'll name two things, and neither one will be a surprise to you. One is that while we expect our membership will hold steady or maybe even grow because we're reaching so many more people now, we anticipate that people will be able to give less in terms of financial contributions. So I worry what that will mean for our planning. And then the other worry is when we are ready to return in some hybrid form, how do we navigate that, right? I feel like now we're in this zone where we know what to do and we're doing it. But I remember those first few weeks where we were making grueling decisions and having to pivot and pivot and pivot and communicate each pivot. And, every decision was just heartbreaking. And I can tell that somewhere on the horizon, we're going to be back in that phase of hard decision making. And, how to make those calls. I think we will have the benefit of time where we can experiment. But we do have to get it right. And I worry about that. I don't know exactly where we're going to land in that hybrid world. I think for good reason, people are reassessing and wondering, why was I running all over the city like a mad person? I actually like being home more with my kids, I think people are having those quiet conversations with themselves, but how does that change the patterns of religious school, for example? So we'll find our way, but those are some of my worries. How about you?
I think it's the same, right? I mean, there's an expectation that there will be a significant drop in contributions and in revenue from the other sources from which synagogue depends upon revenue. And we want to first and foremost continue the message to our community that the congregation, the community, and one's ability to be a part of it is not dependent on one's ability to pay, certainly not at this moment. I mean, we know, as everybody else does, that unemployment's at 15%, that 44% of Canadians are impacted in some way, shape, or form by the economy. And we want people to know that the community is here because the community is here, period, end of story. But at the same time, those that are able to contribute at levels that they were able to do last year, we hope that they'll continue to do that. And those who feel inspired to perhaps do a little bit more to help keep the bottom from falling out. We're going to have to ask, as I'm sure you will too, you're going to have to ask others to step forward and help cover that. And then, you have to think about what are your essential services and how do you tighten your own belt. And you look to whatever savings and reserves you've managed to accumulate. As one of my board member points out, there's really no budget this year. I mean, if the federal government can spend $250 billion to prop the country up, you can't really think in terms of budget, because you can't think about it in the same way. You have to think about what is it that you need to do and how much can you raise versus how much do you need to spend in order to maintain your essential services. And so that's the approach that we're taking, but it's very hard because there's so much that's unknown. we won't have a clear picture of what the financial circumstances are until our fiscal year is July to June. So our notification for membership contributions are about to go out. So when the first tranche comes back, we'll get an idea of how we are compared to last year and the previous years. But we just don't know, and we'll just have to ride that storm out. And then, as you said, it's like the second part is what's the approach to returning to in-person activities, and a lot of that's going to depend upon what the public health regulations and authorities say is the way to do that. And there's all sorts of questions, not just in terms of like physical distancing, which we're fortunate that our facility is big enough that we can accommodate a large number of people physical distancing if we're allowed to have that many people in the building. But it's like, what does that look like? Masks, gloves, cleaning protocols, school, how do you deal with the vulnerable population? During season, we might have 150, 200 people over the age of 65 come once a week to play canasta and mahjong and book clubs, and it's a very active senior population. Is it going to be safe to do that, or do they come? Are they going to want to do that even if you are open? And then also the same things as you said about Hebrew school and so forth. And this is a time of uncertainty. I think we have to focus on our values and be willing to experiment with multiple modalities of delivery in order to figure that out. But but we will. It's like I gain solace in the fact that we Jews have been around for 4,000 years, because this isn't our first rodeo with these kinds of crises and reinvention and renewal and so forth. So on the one hand, it's like anxiety driven, it's like oy vey. But on the other hand, it's a moment of incredible creativity and opportunity.
Yeah.
So we have to do that.
Large congregations like ours, I would say there's a risk and there's an opportunity. So the risk is that people take for granted that we're always going to be there, right? These big edifices on the hill that are, I don't know, how old is Beth Tzedek?
Beth Tzedek is, I think it's 63 years old, but if you go back to the two shuls that amalgamated, it's 100 years old.
Yeah. So Holy Blossom, as the first congregation of the city from 1856, we can say we've got, this long history, and so people can say, okay, those places are always going to endure. They'll find their way. They're strong. They don't need me, right? That's the risk, is that people will think that there are other places that are more vulnerable, and that's where they should put their time and their talent and their treasure. But really, we are vulnerable too, just like anywhere. But this is the positive side of the coin, is that we also can look to our history. The leadership of each congregation can look to its history and say, well, we survived 2 world wars, we survived Great Depression. Like, of course, we're going to survive this. We'll find our way. We'll figure it out. And, tighten the belt and bootstraps and all that. We know how to do that. We will.
Have you been thinking at all about, there's some, and I happen to ascribe to this, that this is, there are trends in the world, certainly in the synagogue world, that have been in effect for 20 years, let's say, that now the pandemic, clearly shows that those trends are here, like live streaming, for example, and the use of technology and video conferencing and so forth and so on. Have you been thinking about what are the things that the emerging future post-pandemic, the ways in which synagogue life and its operations might be permanently impacted by all this?
So again, I don't have a crystal ball, but I think I can say with confidence, there's no going back when it comes to the worship side. And we're at this terrible and wonderful intersection of Bathurst and Eglinton, which has been under construction forever, including our own construction. So people just don't like to come to that part of the city. It's aggravating, right? If I can say Kaddish with an online minyan at 7:30, see my friends, do my mitzvah, and then carry on with my day, that's not so bad. I'll forfeit the bagel right afterwards. So I think we're already looking into wiring all of our spaces so that we can provide regular online services, and hope that the core that can come will come. When it comes to the education front, that's so much more complicated. To ask our teachers to plan a curriculum twice so that there is for the kids in the room and the kids at their kitchen tables back home, that's hard and it's expensive. To pay the teachers to do twice the work when the parents still only want to pay for their one kid, it's hard. So we haven't figured that out yet. With adult education, it's much easier, right? If we bring in, some great speaker, sure, join us online, no trouble. But I think it will force us to be more creative in-house, right? So let's say it's some great speaker. Beth Tzedek does this all the time. So imagine that expert up front is not giving just a frontal piece, but halfway through the lecture, the rabbi or the lay leader says, okay, everyone, we're going to pause now, and we're going to reflect on this question based on what we just heard. And then there are little roundtable discussions all over the room and in Zoom rooms online. And then we come back to hear from the expert again. But there has to be, and we've known this for a long time, right? Both the Reform and conservative movements have been studying relational Judaism for long enough that we know this is what we should be doing as best practice anyway. Right. It's not just dessert and coffee after the lecture. That's not enough. Right. People need a chance to integrate what they're hearing into their own lives and to be able to vocalize their own assessment of whatever they're hearing. So I think we're all going to be forced to do that better. And I'm excited about that.
I am too. And so with that, let's bring this to a close. Rabbi, thank you so much for joining me today, and B'hatzlacha Rabbah. We wish you and Holy Blossom only great success as you continue to do the holy work of building Jewish community and sustaining it at this time of crisis. I want to thank everyone who's joining us today for Conversations Over Coffee, a wonderful activity of Beth Tzedek All Access. You can find out more of what's happening at Beth Tzedek by coming to our website, www.beth-tzedek.org. Join us this Thursday night, Friday, and Shabbat for Shavuot. The first time we'll be live streaming Shabbat services and Yom Tov services. And we look forward to continuing this journey with you as we learn what works for us as we connect our community using this tool at this time of crisis. And want to, want to invite you to join me next week, Monday at 12:30, as Nigel Savage will be my guest. Nigel is the president and CEO of Hazon, which is the largest Jewish environmental group in the world today. They sponsor all sorts of educational and environmental activities, including the Israel Ride, which is where I met Nigel in 2008. I've now ridden my bicycle 4 times from Jerusalem to Eilat. So Nigel will come, he'll be talking to us about issues of the environment. And especially I would imagine if we weren't paying enough attention to the science of pandemic, and if a pandemic leads us to be isolated in our homes. What happens if we don't pay enough attention to climate change and we run out of places to actually live on this earth? So that'll be the topic for next week with Nigel, 12:30. Thanks for sticking with us. Have a wonderful week. Chag Sameach and Shabbat Shalom.